Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Better Call Saul Season 1, Episode 4, Hero. And oh my god, guys, this was by far the best episode of the season. So much crazy shit happened in this episode, and so much went down this episode. And I have to say, this episode really made me change my opinions of a lot of things about Jimmy. Keep in mind, guys, this show's a character study, and I did what the show wanted me to do. I studied Jimmy's character in this episode very carefully, and this was by far the best episode I was into, and just so much we saw in this episode, definitely, and I absolutely loved it. I thought last week's episode was gonna be great, but this one was even better, and let's just get into it. So once again, we start off with a flashback, and I kind of feel like this is gonna be a weekly thing where we start off with a flashback, which, if that is true, then I'm all for it, because it's really making us see more of Jimmy's character, and really makes me have this new theory, and that is that Slippin Jimmy has never changed, and we'll get to that. But basically, Jimmy is drunk with this guy named Stevie, and they're talking about howling and the wolf brain, and his buddy says that his town sucks, and Jimmy takes him to an after hours place, and they continue howling and heading over, and Stevie asks his name, and he says Saul, as in Saul, S. All Goodman, of course, what his eventual alias is going to be. And they come upon a wall with a fat stack of cash, and then Jimmy asks if there's an ID, and Stevie says some fat guy that he points out a guy further down the alley. They get closer, and they see this big guy laid out that looks dead, and Jimmy gets a stick out of a dumpster, pokes him, but he's not dead. He's just terribly drunk, and he's humming Smoke on the Water. And the guy flips Jimmy off and calls him a butthole. Then he starts singing Butthole to the tune of the song, threatens to go John Claude on them, and then falls to sleep. And Stevie says he's keeping the money, and Jimmy takes the guy's watch off him, and Stevie asks what kind this is and asks to see it. He sees that it's a Rolex and calls Jimmy greedy. He tells Jimmy to keep the cash while he keeps the watch, but Jimmy says the watch is worth $3K. And Stevie offers him all the money in his wallet on another $80 and calls Jimmy a sucker and heads off. The drunk guy scams Stevie out of his cash, and back at their hotel room, they talk about the scam and smoke some dope and drinks, and Jimmy says the scam is only good enough to make beer money. So, definitely, once again, it shows us what Jimmy was like back then. But I have to say, this episode really made me feel like Slippin' Jimmy is still Slippin' Jimmy. He hasn't changed. He still is the same person. Because we then go back to the present, and of course it's Jimmy in the woods talking to that couple that he stole that money from, and he hunted down in the tent, and he says he already called their lawyer and says an innocent man is in jail because their son, and Betsy says they'll crucify Craig, and they can't risk losing everything. She says it was a teensy mistake, and she's like, it was a teensy mistake, it wasn't that big of a deal. Jimmy asks what their plan was before he found them, and Craig says they were still working it out. Jimmy says they have some room to make excuses. He says to say they took a camping trip on the spur of the moment, and he says Kim Wexler is good and we'll make it work. And Betsy asks about the money, and Jimmy says the cash is a bargaining chip, and Betsy asks if he expects them to give it back, and says they are not guilty and it belongs to them. And Craig says he worked weekends and holidays very, very hard on this. He worked very hard, and Betsy says he deserved overtime, and they think it's about what's fair, not legal. And Betsy says slavery used to be illegal. Jimmy says it's right up there with slavery, and Betsy begs him not to tell anyone about the money, because it is illegal what they're doing. Stealing money is illegal, and she needs to understand that. So, as much as they want to weasel themselves out of it, what they do is illegal. So, there's really no way out of this. As much as they want a way out of this, there is no way out of this. So they offer him some money, and she has to pretend he didn't see the money, and Jimmy says he can't take a bribe, which I like that Jimmy is telling them, look, I can't help you with this. I saw the money. It's clear to me that you stole the money, so I'm gonna arrest you, and I'm gonna take you to court, and I can understand why Jimmy said that. So he says he can take a retainer for his legal services, and Craig says he's not their lawyer, and he says not yet. Jimmy says the other firm is shiny and full of lawyers, but says they will get a passion and commitment from him. I reminds him that he found them, and he says he will be devoted to them. He asks why not. Betsy says he's the kind of lawyer guilty people hire, and she offers him the cash again. So I was kind of wondering, where exactly is Jimmy going with this? Is he in favor of them? Is he going to help them? Is he actually going to help them out with this case? I really did not know where he was going to go here. So then we see Mike, who I have to say is probably my favorite character on the show. Just the bonding between those two, I love. It's so funny, and I love Mike's character. He's in the parking attendant booth when Jimmy pulls up. He asks if he made the paper, and Mike asks what. Jimmy said the Kettlemans were all found safe and sound camping, And he doesn't tell him what was actually going on. He just says they were safe and sound camping, and he says he went out and found them. And Jimmy says, "You assume," and I like this line, "you assume criminals will be smarter than they are," and it breaks his heart a little because they're really not smart. They're not. They're kind of idiots actually. And it breaks his heart a little that they're not as smart. Jimmy thanks him for the help and tells Mike if he ever needs assistance, and Mike shuts the window on him because he really doesn't want to hear him again. I mean, that whole thing last week. In the courthouse, Jimmy waits for Nacho and asks why he's in handcuffs, and he says Nacho is the victim here. And by the way, guys, I remember what I saw Nacho from. I said it. I said he looked like a familiar actor. Well, that's because he plays Vic on Orphan Black. I didn't realize it was the same guy. I knew he was from something, just know what, and that's what he was from. Vic from Orphan Black, same guy. Good actor. Really good in this. The cop unlocks him. Jimmy says the family wasn't even kidnapped. They were camping. And the cop tells Jimmy not to push him and calls him a scumbag. He also tells him that Nacho has got his eyes on him. And Jimmy says he needed more than what Nacho asked, so they should be square. He asks if Nacho needs a ride. And he asks Jimmy if he expects him to believe they went camping. And he says he just ran his offer by Jimmy. And then someone warned them to go camping. And Jimmy says they are woodsy types, but they don't plan ahead. And Nacho says he ratted and there will be consequences. Because, of course, Nacho was pissed at Jimmy because he told Jimmy, if you rat out on me, there's something bad's going to happen to you. So Jimmy says it was probably someone worried about the kids. And Jimmy says Nacho was sloppy and that's on him. He says you didn't even care the blood out of your van. And Jimmy says he gave them probable cause out the wazoo. And Jimmy says he's lucky they got the family out before he did something more stupid. And Jimmy says the good Samaritan that warned them did them a favor. It got them out of this. So Nacho stomps away, and honestly, I understand what Jimmy's saying. Look, there really is no way out of this. I mean, if Nacho did something wrong, he did something wrong. He doesn't exactly seem innocent because he didn't clean the blood out of his van and things like that. So I have to agree with Jimmy that really he wants to come across as innocent. Even if he is innocent, he doesn't seem innocent right now. He really doesn't. But the Kettlemans, we know, are the ones that did it. But they're not going to stop going after him because he just doesn't seem innocent right now. So I have to agree with what Jimmy said there, and I think that was a really good line. So basically, later Jimmy tries to figure out how to launder the money the Kettlemans gave him so it looks like legit lawyering fees. So Jimmy's getting a custom-tailored suit and expensive wool. He has a piece of paper he's reading off to choose the proper Sea Island cotton shirt with a mother-of-pearl buttons. And Jimmy looks at some loud orange shirts when the tailor comes back. He then goes back to the nail shop to look at color swatches because he wants his hair colored. And basically to, go on disguise himself. The Asian woman says it's the wrong color for him. He says to go with a simple curling iron job and asks for Tony Curtis ringlets from Spartacus. And Kim calls Jimmy and gets his recording of him with a fake British accent. And she said it to her and asked him for a movie. Now, I must say, Jimmy's really good at accents, I have to say. She asked him out for a movie Saturday night and even offers to pay. And she asked him to give her a call either way. So that kind of came out of nowhere that he basically, I thought that was really interesting that she asked him out on a date. I didn't think that was going to happen, but wow, that was really interesting. So Hamlin asked Kim about the Kettlemans, and she said they kind of screwed them over. He asked her to take a ride, which they did. They did screw them over because she thought they were innocent, and Jimmy knew they weren't, and they kind of just screwed him over. So he asked her to take a ride with him, and she asked where they're going. He heads to a parking lot, shows her a billboard. He said it's his suit. Jimmy took out a billboard where he's dressed like Hamlin, even has blonde hair. And Hamlin says Jimmy is forcing his hand, and Jimmy sits with cucumbers on his eyes when there's a knock at a salon door. This really shows that Jimmy is kind of in his own world, sort of. Like, he's not exactly in the same world as everyone. Like, he kind of just thinks things that aren't true. Like, he legitimately thinks that he is going to become in Hamlin's position. And while that might be true in the present, right now, he's not in Hamlin's position. So him doing that is, you can't do that. And I really feel bad for Jimmy because of that. So he goes to answer, finds Kim there, and he offers to try the foot bath, and he goes back to soaking his feet, and Kim sits and he tells her how to turn on the massage chair. She says it's nice, and he says he told her. Jimmy says it's one of the perks of the job. She hands him a cease and desist letter, and he asks how pissed Hamlin is. I don't know what that was. Kim says it was serious and asks what the hell with the billboard. She's obviously upset about the billboard. I mean, that's just weird what he did. She says she doesn't get his angle, which I don't either, but of course it's a character study, so we're supposed to be like, what is really doing here? I agree with Kim, like, what is up with him? So she says he's spending money turning himself into a Hamlin clone, and Jimmy says it's not personal, but she thinks it is. She says the billboard was a declaration of war, but he says he's building a brand. She says he's ripping off a brand. He says Hamlin was trying to keep him from using his own name, and she says she gets that, but says Jimmy is better than this, and Jimmy says she's better than Schmuck Hamlin, and he says she could work anywhere, and he says if Hamlin wants to come after him, he'll be ready, guns blazing. So we really got a big competition here between Jimmy and Hamlin. It kind of seems like Kim is in the middle of it. Kim needs to make a decision here, definitely. Does she want to, be with Jimmy, or does she want to work with Hamlin? And Kim turns off the massage chair, says the next step is an injunction, a fight he can't win, and Jimmy ignores her and she leaves. And I can understand she said that, but it kind of seems like Kim to me just doesn't really know where she wants to go, because she's working with Hamlin, but she's also working with Jimmy. So where exactly does Kim reside? Where does she want to work? That's what I want to know. So Hamlin says Jimmy's ripping off their logo. Jimmy says there are fonts out there. Hamlin says it's a trademark brand identifier. And Hamlin says he feels like he's looking at Groucho Marx in the mirror. And Hamlin says he's trying to confuse clients. And Jimmy says it's his name and they can't take it from him. And Jimmy says Hamlin wants to change his name. And the judge tells Jimmy that's enough. And this all goes to court. And it was pretty crazy. He says he's within his rights to advertise using his own name, but the billboard copies obvious elements of their logo. She says the billboard must come down in 48 hours. So Jimmy makes a call to the TV station, and he really realizes that he cannot fight this. And he says it's David Sash versus Goliath case, and the reporter doesn't seem interested, and the call ends. So Hamlin walks by, and Jimmy flips him off, and Jimmy calls another TV station, asks if they want to be the station that brings down Big Law. And I have to say, Hamlin's a really good villain. One of the things I like about Hamlin is that he's not violent, but he is a very good villain. And that's something I do like about Better Call Saul. It just shows that Better Call Saul is not like Breaking Bad, because Better Call Saul is so much more dialogue-driven, and while Breaking Bad was dialogue-driven, Breaking Bad had a lot more like intense scenes, and just, he's not really violent. He is definitely more just a guy that is Jimmy's enemy, and the guy that they're definitely going to clash a lot, which I like seeing. So the judge tells Jimmy that's enough. He says he's within his rights to advertise using his own name, but the billboard copies obvious elements of their logo. She said, oh, I just read this. Basically, he makes call for call about the circumstance. He's not making a lot of headway. He keeps calling station after station. I was like, Jimmy, there's nothing you can do. It's got to come down. He needs to accept the fact that the billboard's going to come down. But Jimmy doesn't take no for an answer, as we know. So he's getting nowhere. Then he sees a girl in a college t-shirt, makes another call. A guy is taking down the billboards. Jimmy stands in front of a camera. This is such a good scene. I really enjoyed this scene. He's working with college kids, and Jimmy asks how he looks and turns to his good side. He's paying the kid $100 for this. Remember that, guys. $100. And he says his name, and he says he's self-made and put himself through law school. He says he works as a public defender and has a dream to own his own business, which he eventually does. And I like seeing this scene because it's foreshadowing what he's eventually going to become. And he says he saved up and was able to buy one billboard, but says a large law firm came after him saying that he was hurting their business. And he says they're rich and powerful, and he's just one man. So the court sided with them, and he says now his little billboard is coming down. The worker almost falls, and he's dangling. Jimmy says to call 911, then he runs to help the guy. He runs up the lawn ladder of the work truck while the guy screams for help, and the kid keeps filming. I thought it was hilarious that the kid just keeps filming the whole thing. He's loving it. So, plus he has no idea what to do, because, he gave him $100, so why not? I mean, I would probably have done the same thing, so Jimmy starts climbing up the billboard ladder. Cars are stopping. The crowd is gathering. He makes it to the top of the billboard, and the guy yells for help to hurry up. He's dangling by one small harness, and Jimmy goes to help him, tells the guy to grab his hand. Finally catches the guy's finger, starts pulling. He helps the guy up, and he asks if he's okay. The guy says, took you long enough, and it was all a setup, apparently, because Jimmy does an interview and says he was scared but knew he had to do it, and Hamlin rants as they watch the news. He says he has a publicity stunt and no one will buy it, and Kim says people love a hero. Kim is admired that he did this, and I have to say, that was a pretty smart thing that Jimmy did. I mean, the whole thing with him falling, it was all a plan just for people to see that Jimmy can run his own business. And I think that Jimmy is definitely good in his business, definitely. He would be good at that. So you really see that Kim is starting to be impressed by Jimmy, and I'm really enjoying Kim's character. I mean, again, we don't know much about Saul's personal life. We don't know what eventually ends up happening to him. We don't know if he ends up with Kim, but I definitely feel like they're going to start dating. I definitely feel like they're going to get together. Just by this episode, I definitely feel like they're going to get together. So Jimmy checks his voicemail. He has 7 new messages that start coming in right after the news aired, and Jimmy pulls up at Chuck's place and grabs a newspaper from the driveway. He's on the front page of the Metro section, and he thinks about how to talk to Chuck about it. And That whole scene though was very interesting. So he puts the paper in the trunk of his car, grabs some bags to take inside, leaves his phone and other gear in the mailbox, heads inside, and Chuck comes down and says he's early. And he tells Chuck his phone is ringing off the hook and he has 3 consults before lunch. Chuck asks what credits this change, and Jimmy says he took his advice and did good work. Chuck asks if he's been getting referrals from public defense clients, and he says sure, and then says he needed to get his face out there. And Chuck asks if Burger Ron is sending clients, and Jimmy says it was someone on his team. Jimmy said it's elbow grease and clean living, and Chuck says he knew he had it in him, and he's really happy for him. And he asks for the newspaper that's missing. Jimmy says he didn't see it outside and says maybe they forgot it today or a kid grabbed it. And Jimmy says he has a ton of reading material. Jimmy says he has to go, and Chuck wishes him luck today. He says hard work looks good on you. He watches Jimmy leave, and after Jimmy pulls away, this scene was crazy. Chuck looks at the paper in his neighbor's driveway. He goes and gets his solar blanket on, pulls it over his head. He goes to the door, mentally prepares himself to go outside, and it's such a big scene because I mean he's terrified of going outside, and we don't know why. We don't know why Chuck is so scared of this. I mean, we know that they had that whole thing before with him in the space blanket and him yelling at Jimmy that he's not Slippin Jimmy anymore. But clearly he is legitimately scared of going outside, and it really shows what someone like that, how terrified someone is of that. It really reminds me of Sheila from Shameless in season 1 when she was terrified going outside. That's basically Chuck. And he goes to the door, mentally prepares himself to go outside. The sun shines down on him. He freaks out. He almost gets run over crossing the street. He can hear electricity crackling from the power lines above him. Takes the paper, tosses down a $20, runs back to his house. The neighbors watches all this out her window. Chuck flips through the paper, sees the story on Jimmy, pulls this solar blanket over his head, and curls up in it. So Chuck needs to face his fears, definitely. He needs to face his fears, and I'd say this was a really good episode. I definitely really enjoyed it. I like where the show is heading. I think this episode had a lot of really good stuff in there. First of all, I really want to talk about Jimmy and being a hero. I kind of have this theory now that Slippin Jimmy is just that, Slippin Jimmy. He hasn't changed. He's still the same person he was before. Although he's not doing drugs, he's not doing that. His personality is still the same. He doesn't do drugs and things like that. He's not going to go to prison, but he still has the same sort of persona as Slippin Jimmy. That's just how I feel about Jimmy. I really want to talk about Hamlin because I really do love Hamlin as a villain. I mean, oh my god, he is such a good villain, and I'm really liking Kim's character. As I said, I definitely feel those two are going to get very close very quickly. I am looking forward to seeing if they develop a relationship because I want to see a relationship between those two. I think those are two characters where I would like to see a relationship between them. I want to see where they can go with that because I think it could be really interesting, definitely. As far as Nacho goes, Nacho needs to understand that he's not coming across as being innocent right now. Even though Jimmy wants to help him, he's not coming across as innocent. And even though Betsy and Craig are the ones that stole the money, he is not exactly making himself look like an innocent person. So I definitely feel Jimmy needs to make him look like an innocent person. Let's talk about Mike. I don't know why Mike was so rude to Jimmy, but why did he shut the door on Jimmy? I don't know. He seemed like he really wanted to help Jimmy last week, and then he just shut the door on him. I don't know if he really wants nothing to do with him, or if he secretly just wants Jimmy to help himself. I don't know what's going on there, but that's really interesting. Let's talk about Betsy and Craig. Betsy and Craig need to realize that, yeah, they're not smart. They're not smart. They have no idea what they're doing. They should not be doing what they're doing because they're not good at it, and I think definitely they just need to not do what they're doing. So it's as simple as that. There's going to be a lot of tension definitely between Hamlin and Jimmy. I'm wondering how Hamlin's going to respond to Jimmy's hero, if he's going to do something. I'm looking forward to what Hamlin is going to do in response to this, because what Hamlin's going to do is going to be really interesting to see. And I really like this plot going on here, and I have to say, the 4-episode test, yes, the show is awesome now. The show is amazing. It's taking me a little while to get into it, but after this episode, oh, you betcha I'm into it. I love all the characters now, and a lot of people have said some of the characters are really flat. I think this episode made me love Kim's character. It made me more interested in Hamlin's character. It made me more interested in Chuck's character. Chuck is a character that he needs to face his fears. He needs to understand that there's nothing scary outside, and I want to see him face his fears, definitely. I need to see that happen. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really want to talk about. The flashbacks I've really been enjoying. I'm liking that they're showing the flashbacks. They're showing us what Jimmy was like back then. It's just showing how sneaky he is and things like that. I mean, what I did realize, I just realized this, guys. The flashback showed Jimmy doing something fake to make himself look like a hero, to get his money. And then, of course, Betsy and Craig did the same thing. So it's really showing that Jimmy he knows what they're doing and things like that. He can relate to them, and I like seeing these flashbacks. So they keep doing these flashbacks every single episode. It makes us care about Jimmy's character more, makes us more interested in his character. And again, because this is a character study, guys, you have to be interested in his character, and I am very interested in his character. I like where they're going with his character, I like what they're doing with his character, and I think his character overall is being very well developed, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where they go in the next episode. But by far, guys, was by far the best episode of the season. I definitely really enjoyed it. It was funny. It had some great dramatic moments. It made us care more about the characters. Kim and Jimmy, where do they stand? Kim needs to choose a side. I think she has now, but I still don't know. It seems like she's working with Hamlin, but also with Jimmy. So she needs to choose where she really wants to go here. Does she want to work with Hamlin, or does she want to work with Jimmy? There's no in between. You need to choose what you want to do, and you have to choose. You can't choose both. You have to choose one or the other, and Kim needs to realize that. And I don't understand why Kim doesn't realize that, but she needs to understand that, and she's not understanding that. Well, guys, if my review, hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys saw this episode. What do you think of the show overall? I think a lot of people are enjoying it more and more as it goes on. I know some people didn't really like it, but I think after this episode, everyone really loves it. I mean, the AV Club gave this episode an A, and I was very surprised, but I think the reason is just because all the characters are really well developed. And yeah, not a lot happened in this episode, but at the same time, tons of stuff happened in this episode. And it really just sets the tone for the show. It's not trying to be like Breaking Bad. This episode shows that, and that's one of the things I'm liking about the show as it goes on. You see, the second episode tried to be like Breaking Bad, and it worked, but this right here is showing what Better Call Saul is going to be. It's not going to be like Breaking Bad. It's going to be its own thing, and I love that about Better Call Saul. I love that Better Call Saul is not trying to be like Breaking Bad. I love that it's just using the idea of just being character study and using that to its advantage. It's really doing a good idea of doing that, and each character is getting fleshed out really well. I'm really caring about each character, and that's really what a good character study and a good show like this does, and I'm really enjoying that. But well, guys, it's my review. Hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for Pretty Little Liars. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.